Hey, what's up, everybody? I want to welcome you to another episode of the Dreamerspro Daily Recap, where we give you a recap of all of the hot topics that we covered that day. You can catch them in their long format and also catch it fully streaming for free on Apple Podcasts. As you guys know, we discussed it previously that Stephen A. Smith's contract was basically about to end, right? And he was in the process of renegotiating a new contract with ESPN. Stephen A. Smith made it clear that he wants to be the highest paid personality at the network. Essentially, or allegedly, what had happened was they had offered him an $18 million year deal, right, per annum. And apparently, Stephen A. Smith rejected it because he wanted $25 million per annum. I think he wanted a $100 million deal. So there were reports that were kind of going back and forth about it, and they were having some disagreements about this. But then something interesting happened. I came across an article yesterday from The Sun, which basically had the following headline: ESPN's replacement for Stephen A. Smith revealed, with uncertainty over his future and not budging over $25 million contract. And I was like, wait a minute, what? Is there a possibility that ESPN is already in search to find somebody to replace Stephen A. Smith if these guys don't come to an agreement? So let's get into this article here. It continues on by saying, Stephen A. Smith and ESPN have yet to come to a new contract to keep him at the network. The two parties have exchanged figures, but so far nothing has been solidified. Stephen A. Smith has not agreed to a new contract with ESPN. ESPN reportedly offered Smith a $90 million contract over 5 years, an annual value of $18 million, according to Puck. However, the network is far from what Stephen A. Smith wants in his deal with ESPN. With ESPN First Take host looking for $25 million a year. His contract expires in 2025, and Smith is willing to move networks to get that value. With the threat of Stephen A. Smith leaving ESPN looming, let's take a look at some potential names that could replace him on First Take. Shannon Sharpe is the logical first choice to take over on the First Take desk in the event of Stephen A. Smith leaves. Sharpe has grown into a fan favorite and already has experience alongside Molly Cameron, other guests. The former NFL tight end recently signed an extension with ESPN, so he will be around for the foreseeable future. Sharpe could help provide stability on First Take during a transitional period away from Stephen A. Smith. It then goes on to have Ryan Clark. You have him as well, and then you have Shaquille O'Neal, and finally they have Pat McAfee is already one of ESPN's high-paid talents, so promoting him to First Take could be the easiest solution to replace Stephen A. Smith. The biggest issue would be finding a way for him to continue the Pat McAfee show while hosting First Take. McAfee certainly has the personality to fill the void that that Stephen A. Smith would leave, and he has a large fan base behind him. It feels unlikely that he would set his own show aside to move to ESPN First Take, though. And then it mentioned Jason Kelsey and a few others there. So that's what the article had to say there. What are my thoughts on this? Look, I think that we are in a transitional period in sports media. There's a lot of change that's taking place within the landscape. And quite frankly, there's more money in it now than there's ever been before because of what's happening with these independent dollars, right? There's a lot of money in the independent space, a lot of money. And let's just be honest, if we're looking at the sports media landscape, there are only a few guys paying top dollar. Few guys, right? You have DraftKings, you have Prize Picks, you have Game Time, you have a few others. And the fact is, if you can have access to these people, you can make yourself a nice coin. In the case of Stephen A. Smith, I believe, is positioning himself to not only have the independent wing of what he's doing, but also to transition onto another network or have his show picked up by one of the majors, Amazon, HBO Max, and one of these guys, and kind of transition that way, right? I think Stephen A. Smith is beginning to realize what some other people like Dan Lebron and others have realized, which is, look, there's some money out here. Bill Simmons is another one. Bill Simmons went on to build a $100 million company, right? So there is money out here, and I think Stephen A. Smith is beginning to realize that, he doesn't necessarily need ESPN. He doesn't necessarily need ESPN. In the case of ESPN, as the article entailed, there could be some possible candidates to replace him. Shannon Sharpe would be the most obvious one. As a matter of fact, Shannon Sharpe and Stephen A. Smith have actually alluded to this being a possibility. They've actually said it. If Stephen A. Smith decides one day to move on and he wants to do something else, Shannon Sharpe can fill the void. So, of course, you have Shannon Sharpe there. Pat McAfee, I definitely think he has the personality. But as the article said, we don't know how it's going to work between the Pat McAfee show and ESPN First Take. Look, I think Stephen A. Smith also has aspirations beyond the world of sports. I think that is true. Even ourselves, we've been really against discussing politics, but with the way that the world is going right now, we decided that, look, we have an opinion on certain issues, larger societal issues, and we want to give our opinion on it. One of the reasons we're going to start a second platform towards the end of this year, and I hope some of you guys check that out. But Stephen A. Smith has an interest in politics, right? And politics, if I'm being honest with you, they're just a larger range of people that are interested in discussing politics. Sports can be limiting at times, right? Because it's seasonal and all of that stuff. But in the case of politics and what's happening in the world, things are happening every single day, right? And that may be something that's more appealing to Stephen A. Smith, and one can understand why he would want to go do something else. So I totally understand it. And remember, Stephen A. Smith is in his 50s, right? He's been doing sports media for quite some time. I think, well, at least 25 years now. So for him wanting to transition into something else, that could be it. Maybe, this could be a thought. Maybe he's like, well, I want to go do something else, but if you guys pay me an incredible number, maybe I'll stay. And maybe if they're not willing to hit that number, he's like, well, if you guys are not going to give me this number that would kind of cause me to kind of rethink my strategy, then I might as well go on and go do something else, right? That could be a possibility. I don't know. So the question to the audience is the following. What do you think ultimately happens with Stephen A. Smith and ESPN First Take? Do you think Stephen A. Smith decides to leave the network and go do his own thing? Or do you think ESPN matches his offer? And remember this. One of the reasons, or the primary reason Skip Bayless left ESPN back in 2011 was because they couldn't agree on some money. That was the reason as well. And Stephen A. Smith himself has talked about how shrewd ESPN bosses can be about opening the bank. We have some underlying beef that's been taking place here. And before we even get into it, let me just quickly say that none of this surprises me. Now, as you guys know, originally, JJ Redick came into the fore when he started doing his podcast, although he was a former NBA player, The Old Man and the Three, right? He used to do his podcast, and then it was a very successful podcast. And ultimately, we heard that he was going to be joining ESPN to, as a part-time contributor. And we started seeing him on shows like ESPN First Take. And during his visits on ESPN First Take, himself and Stephen A. Smith had some pretty contentious moments. Moments that, if I'm being frank with you, I'm surprised that, JJ went at Stephen A. Smith as directly as he did. And many times he was able to get Stephen A. Smith to just kind of back off and try to play it off and say, oh, no, it's fantastic. This is perfect. We're all friends behind the scenes. It's great for ratings and all of that stuff, right? But ever since we started hearing the news that JJ Redick could potentially become the head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers, we began to see Stephen A. Smith take some pretty strong positions against JJ and essentially saying things that I think some people felt out there, right? But Stephen A. Smith, being the politician that he is, he would always find a way to couch his real opinions by basically spewing out compliments to begin with. I think JJ is great, this and this and this and this, but he's really an acquired taste and blah, 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 blah. Well, apparently, some of these things that Stephen A. Smith has been saying about JJ Redick hasn't been going over well with him, right? And we came across an article here. What is it? From the Sun.com. This is from their sports section. And essentially it says, Stephen A. Smith spotted outside ESPN studios after rift with JJ Redick emerges in issues behind the scenes at ESPN First Take. And I went in to read some of the details of what that article entailed. And it turns out that Stephen A. Smith and JJ Redick may have some issues here. So let me get into what this article has to say here. It then continues on. Stephen A. Smith dressed and impressed while leaving ESPN studio. The First Take host is known for his spiffy suits and kept up his style last week. Then continues on. Stephen A. wore his iconic suit. And then it goes, Stephen A. Smith took on his usual duties starring on the show alongside Molly Qerim. After completing the show, Stephen A. Smith remained in his iconic suit before strutting out of the studio. He kept things simple, sporting a blue suit with a tie. Underneath his suit was spotted a shirt and a complete look. Stephen A. Smith was gripping an orange on his way to out of the studio, perhaps taking a snack for the road home. The 56-year-old is continuing his duties as things get tense on the set of First Take. Stephen A. Smith reportedly hasn't spoken to J.J. Redick for weeks, sources confirmed to the U.S. Sun. Insiders at First Take said Redick didn't stand their BS when Stephen A. Smith and Shannon Sharpe made claims on the show. People on the team told Smith that it's unfair to bash JJ for not being like him. A journalist who works on the show told the U.S. Sun. His way is controversial, always being against other people in arguments. He's criticized Redick for his career choices, which left them not talking to each other in the last few weeks. The situation was getting ridiculous, the insider added. Something had to change. Something did eventually change as Redick accepted the position as the Los Angeles Lakers head coach. Any issues with him should come to an end now that he isn't on the show anymore. That doesn't mean everything is smooth sailing, though. Some at the show are still feeling the tension. Everyone works their ass off for the show to be the best on TV, and many tensions have been rising between journalists, the pundits, and the production crew, said another member of the staff. It's very annoying to deal with. It is possible that Stephen A. Smith may not even remain on the show as he hasn't come to an agreement on a contract extension. Stephen A. Smith is seeking a $25 million per year figure, a figure that ESPN has not been willing to match. And then the article goes on to say a few other things there. So what are my thoughts on this news? Look, initially I was a fan of JJ Redick. He then began to lose me and a lot of people when he started to disrespect players from the previous eras, something that caused him to get called out by some of the Pantheon great players, Bob Cousy, Jerry West, Dominique Wilkins, Michael Cooper. All of them are basically saying that JJ Redick was a moron. Some of the things he was saying were moronic, right? That's what they were saying. So that's where he turned me off. In the case of JJ Redick is a very interesting figure, and I'll tell you why. JJ Redick claims that he dislikes the direction in which sports media had gone with the things that they say, you know, it being kind of controversial and all of that. But nevertheless, JJ Redick would always find some way to end up on First Take, ESPN First Take. He would claim that the show was toxic for sports and all of that. But nevertheless, you're always on the platform complaining about how bad it is. So my thing is, if ESPN First Take is a bad platform, why even go? Number one. Number two, Stephen A. Smith has said it on many occasions that he decides who gets invited on the show. So why would you continue to bring a guy like this on your show who's always trying to make you look like a damn fool on TV and is always complaining about the fact of how the show is done and all? Why would you even bring him on the show? What would have surprised, what I would have liked Stephen A. Smith to say to JJ Redick, it's like, JJ, if you're always going to be complaining, then why are you always coming on the show? Simple. And then JJ would not be left to say, well, you know, and then that's it. JJ Redick is always whining and complaining and pissed off about something. I really don't care about JJ Redick's side in this story. I really don't. He's always mad about something. He's always condescending. He thinks he knows everything. So I really don't care. My thing is, if this is how JJ Redick felt in the first place, why did you continue to go on the show? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, if you didn't like the way it was done, then why did you even bother going? And by the way, let's just state the obvious. JJ, although you do some good things in sports media, you're also full of it as well. You're also full of as well too. Let's not forget that. You made it your position to defend every single thing athletes would do. And in order to get an honest take out of you when an athlete F's up is like trying to squeeze water from a freaking stone. So don't act like as if you're above it all. You're above the fray. Like, I've got this thing figured out and these people don't really know what the hell they're doing. If that's the case, why are you on his show? Why isn't he on your show? Let's cut the nonsense. Man, oh man, people have different things to say about Bronny. A lot of people are like, every day I wake up, I turn on my computer and I look on YouTube. I see somebody else has a different thing to say about Bronny. Some people are all for it, some people are against it, obviously. But when the Lakers decided that they were going to draft Bronny, a lot of us were sitting there saying, so what are the Lakers' plans for Bronny James actually? Like, what are their plans for this young man? Because if you look at the Lakers roster, it is clear that a player like Bronny is not what they need in order to increase their chances to becoming a contender in the Western Conference. And then when they drafted him, we all came to the conclusion that they did it for LeBron James. Rob Pelinka said that it's a magical moment. They have an opportunity to make history and all of that. And we're like, bro, you should be looking to make history by winning championships. But now that we know that the Lakers have given LeBron James a contract extension for the next 2 years, and I personally believe that LeBron is going to retire. I think this is going to be his last NBA contract. I don't see him playing beyond this. He either retires at the end of this season, but I think next year is going to be LeBron James' last year, and he's going to let people know ahead of time so he gets the farewell tour. That's what I personally believe. But then I came across a clip from ESPN's YouTube channel. And in this clip, they were basically explaining what the Lakers' real plan is for drafting Bronny James. And when I heard it, I was absolutely floored. So for those of you who didn't hear what the Lakers' real plans are for drafting Bronny James, I'm going to play it for you now, and I'm going to come back and react to their comments. Take a listen to this here.
NBA eyes will be on that game. And for more on the Lakers, we welcome in our senior NBA insider, Adrian Wojnarowski. So what are people saying about the realistic expectations for Bronny?
Well, what the Lakers' expectations are is that he'll largely be a G League player, like almost any 19-year-old player coming in the league drafted in the second round. I think what you'll ultimately probably see is Bronny James in the first week of the season on the court with his father in a very, I don't want to call it ceremonial, but it's going to, the eyes of the world will be on that. They'll do that the first week of the season, but there's no expectation Bronny James is going to be in the Lakers rotation. He'll spend a lot of his time playing with their G League team, which shares a practice facility with the Lakers.
Okay, so maybe get the father-son moment out of the way, and then it's on to development. So his father, meanwhile, that's what now we talk about. He opted out of his contract. He's expected to stay a Laker. What do we think his new deal is going to look like?
It's very likely going to look like a max deal, whether that's 2 years, 3 years, whether it has trade veto power in it is still something they're working out. But if LeBron James talked about perhaps taking less money if this Laker team would be able to land a player of impact at their mid-level exception. But he was going to have to take at least $20 million less to do that. I don't anticipate that. That kind of player simply isn't out in the marketplace for the Lakers.
Yeah, and could you imagine even taking $20 million on a contract? I know people say, oh, it's LeBron, why not? But look, nobody wants to do that. So what else do you expect from the Lakers, or what do you expect them to do this offseason?
I think a lot of their moves and what's left are going to be minimum contracts, are going to be some moves on the edges, but there's not a dramatic deal for the Lakers to do out in the marketplace.
So you heard what they had to say. I want to get this. I want to get this straight. The plan for the Lakers, the plan the Lakers have for Bronny James is this: they're going to draft him. He's going to play with the team the first week and hit the court, and then after that, they're going to send him to the G League. Why doesn't that make sense? Let's think about this reasonably and logically. Now, remember, this is the part we're going to lose a lot of people who cannot reason properly. They're just going to be in the comment section crying and hollering and doing all kind of stuff. If you understand that a player needs development, wouldn't you try to develop him first before putting him on a basketball court? Why would you do it in the reverse? Why would you let him play for about a week and then send him to the G League when you're aware that he needs to go to the G League? Scooby? Shaggy? Raggy? What are we doing here? What are we doing? That would be tantamount to an owner of a business hiring his son to be his successor as the CEO, and the son is going to run the business for 1 or 2 weeks, and then after those 2 weeks, he's going to send him to business school to go sharpen his business acumen. Aren't you supposed to send him to business school first before he starts sharpening his acumen? I'm lost. Well, some of you say, but he wanted to get some practical experience. What has he been doing all of those years prior to that? Being around his father, running a business. And if you feel like he's been around his father all those years, then he gets the promotion to be the CEO to run the business, but then you decide to go send him to business school, wouldn't that mean that he's not ready to even be running that company? That's the part of the Lakers. This is the modern day Los Angeles Lakers for you. One of the stupidest organizations in all of sports. As a Kobe Bryant fan, the Lakers are a joke of a franchise as we sit here today. They're the clown show of the NBA. I'm being 100% honest with you. They are the clown show of the league. That's the first part. Let's get to the other aspect of this. According to these gentlemen, it was suggested Bronny James is essentially being used as a prop. Bronny James is being used as a prop. They're going to put him on the court to play alongside his father for a photo op, basically. For a photo op. Not that because they're going to put him on the court to play basketball and contribute and have meaningful minutes. No. We're going to put you on the court with your dad. We're going to have the photo op, and then we're going to send you to the G League. What? So that's what this is all about? So there is no substance here. This is just about trying to fulfill some narrative. My God. I'm trying to imagine me as a father doing it. I'm trying to imagine, like, why would I do that? The only way I can rationalize it is if my son says that my dream is just to be on a basketball court with you. And I'll say, okay, well, let's do it for then one, but then you go, I guess that's probably the only scenario in which I could rationalize that. But there's a problem with that line of thinking, and I'll tell you why. That is not the reason, and it just occurred to me as we're doing the show. Some of you are like, well, maybe it's not Bronny's dream. Do you know why? Because Bronny James himself has said it, and no point in time throughout the process did he ever consider playing with his father. So this is not Bronny's dream. This is not his dream. Bronny has said, all I want to hear is my name get called. He said playing with my father or not wasn't really a factor, unless we're going to say that the guy's lying. But I'm going to take him at his words. He said this is not about playing with his dad. He wants to be his own person. He wants to hear his name get called. Even though I don't understand if you want to hear your name get called, you only try out for two teams. You only work out for two teams. We'll have to go through the mental gymnastics of that later on. But nevertheless, are they using this boy for a prop? Nah, I can't do it. I can't do it. The antics are too much. LeBron is out of my top 5 forever. I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm done with this dude. I can't do it.